Overemphasizing positivity, and holy smokes, man, this really hits me. It's not pleasant putting boundaries, but unfortunately, if you don't put boundaries as a leader, you are putting your organization not in a position to win. Bryce 1.0, the nice leader I used to be, would be overreactive instead of being cool, calm, and collected and being control. And nice leaders, they seek validation in the moment. However, kind leaders, they prioritize the greater good long term. So you want to avoid seeking validation. Your job as a leader is to be accommodating, to meet your people where they're at, but not at the expense of being overly accommodating and really bending over backwards, which will maybe hurt them, hurt you, and hurt your organization.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Hey friends, I used to be a nice leader until I transformed into a kind leader. In today's episode, I'm going to break down the 7 characteristics of a nice leader so you can avoid them. Before I do, I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Bryce Henson, your host of the CEO Show podcast. And before I get into it, I created a free leadership course for you. Go to my website, brycehenson.com/leadership, and off to the races we go. Now, the dichotomy or the difference between a nice person and a kind person, which directly translates to leadership, is niceness is often motivated around harmony or approval, where kindness seeks the greater good, even though uncomfortable in the moment. And I'll give you an example of this, which I know you can relate to. This is a while back. I was at a dinner party and networking event in Los Angeles, and I was having a great time, and dinner was served. I was chit-chatting, engaging for the better part of an hour, and I excused myself to go to the bathroom. And when I went to the bathroom, I washed my hands, I looked at the mirror, and you guessed it, I see a big piece of fat green salad in my teeth. And my first reaction is, oh my goodness, how embarrassed am I? I've literally just been at a dinner party conversing for the better part of an hour with a big fat piece of green leafy lettuce in my teeth, and no one said anything. Super embarrassed. Then the other conversation my mind went to, I cannot believe no one said anything to me. And at the end of the day, factory installed human nature, we want to people please. We want to create harmony and not rock the boat, which from an evolutionary perspective has served us well. Now, human nature, we conflict for sure. There's no shortage of conflict, sadly, in the world. We can see that by divorce rates. However, short term, in the moment, we're evolved to prioritize keeping the peace, if you will. And that can be good short term, but that can have devastating long term effects. And, that's just a classic example of that. And I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you've been there. So the moral of the story is don't be someone who's nice, AKA is going to prioritize harmony, versus someone who's kind, who's going to speak up and say, hey, friend, you got something in your teeth, even though it's uncomfortable in the moment. Ultimately, that is looking out for your friend, and that's a good thing to do. So be a kind person, not a nice person, which transforms and translates to leadership. So characteristic number 1 of a nice leader, and by the way, there's a dichotomy into all of these. Also, too, humbly speaking, I have been a nice leader for a lot of my career. So I'm not talking down on you, especially if one or all of these relate to you. I've been there. But the first step is awareness, and that way you can understand where you're at and then take actions to transform into a kind leader. So characteristic number 1 is a nice leader focuses on people pleasing. And yes, a nice leader often prioritizes on being liked and avoids conflict at the expense of tough decisions that move the needle forward. And I think we're all guilty of this to some level. This is just factory installed in human nature, but also from a personality perspective, some people have personalities that are more inclined than not. Now, I'm a huge proponent of the DISC personality assessment, which is through DISC has created a lot of self-awareness for me. And this is what I've taught my organization here at Fit Body Bootcamp, including all the entrepreneurs that I coach. And DISC stands for DISC. DISC. D is for dominant, I is for interactive, S is for supportive, and C is for conscientious. These are the 4 personality styles we all have, but typically speaking, 1 or 2 are more pronounced. Now, I'm high D, but I'm also high I as well. So dominant and also interactive. Ds and Cs, we prioritize task related, where I's and S's focus more and prioritize more on people related. So if you're an I, interactive, or an S, or supportive, typically speaking, you're going to have a harder time with this because we tend to focus on people, which in one way is a superpower. Because I am high I, interactive, I typically like to think I can engage with people, I interact with people, and that is a zone of genius for me. On the flip side, though, it also lends me vulnerable to people pleasing, and that can be a recipe for disaster. And you know you're in this category if, for example, you've ever had to deliver a tough message or deliver tough feedback to someone and you sugarcoat things a bit. And again, we all are guilty of this, but typically nice leaders prioritize avoiding conflict and people pleasing and sugarcoating conversations, which in the moment feels good, but then the devastating effects is you've been in that situation, and I've been there as a young leader, as a nice leader, where I had to have a tough conversation. I had the conversation and I kind of got my point across, but I sugarcoated, and ultimately that felt good in the moment. But what happened is down the road, the teammate did not get the message, and therefore, unfortunately, was not able to adjust their behavior or their action steps. And at the end of the day, that was a losing moment for them, but it was also a losing moment for me as their leader. So number one, avoid being focused completely on people pleasing, which is the first characteristic of a nice leader. The second characteristic of a nice leader is someone who avoids confrontation, which is really at the root of this. And nice leaders, they shy away from confrontation and at the expense of putting the greater good of the organization in play. And I look at conflict, and human nature and the world in general is just always at a state of conflict. That's just part of the organic matter of being on this planet Earth. That is true. However, from a conflict perspective, there's two types of conflict. There's toxic conflict, which toxicity, and from that perspective of conflict, if it's entered in your organization, can be toxic, can be really catastrophic to creating a strong culture. On the other side of the coin, though, there's healthy conflict, there's healthy friction. And think about this in your life, the people that you're closest with, your family, your spouse, your kids, you're able to test boundaries. Typically speaking, you've engaged in healthy conflict. Not everyone sees the things the same, and that's okay. That's what makes us unique. That's what provides human perspective, and that also provides a lot of opportunity in your organization to explore different ideas to move your organization forward. So you want to be able to use that conflict in a healthy way to move the organization forward. The problem is nice leaders, they tend to prioritize away from avoiding confrontation, which again, short-term feels good in the moment, but long-term can really neuter your organization and also your leadership. So characteristic number two, you want to avoid being a nice leader by avoiding conflict. You actually want to lean into healthy conflict, which is the message. Number three, characteristic of a nice leader is inconsistent boundaries. Now, to avoid upsetting anyone, a nice leader may waver on the rules or expectation, which oftentimes can lead to favoritism and then really hurts the company culture. And for me, what I've learned, and again, I've been guilty of this so many times in my young leadership career, I literally had no boundaries. I was trying to meet my team where they're at and really being over accommodating here, which can be, if in overuse, a recipe for disaster. Now, what I've learned is I have a couple different boundaries, and I'll give you a personal boundary. I'll also give you a professional boundary. My professional boundary is I don't take meetings before 10 a.m. Now, there are times where there's emergencies that come up, and given my role, that I'll jump in, but it's about 95% of the time, this rule is maintained, only about 5% flexibility with emergencies. And the reason this is I have a window that my office or my desk, I'm at my desk at 6 a.m. From 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock is my window where I prioritize all the things that I need to get done, the Bryce task to move the organization forward as my CEO responsibility to my franchise partners and my brand at Fit Body Bootcamp. What I realized and what I used to do is take meetings starting at 8 or 8:30, and what happens is that's not enough time for me to get the things I need to do, prioritize that to move the needle forward. And then eventually what happens is fires come, and then the day gets out of hand. So instead, I put a boundary that no meetings before 10 a.m. I have 4 solid hours. And then after 10 o'clock, I have meetings, the fires, the engagement. From 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I have another 7 hours of that interactiveness. But that boundary although short-term unpleasant for my teammate or someone wanting to schedule a meeting, long-term it's beneficial. On the personal side, I'll give you another example of this. I'm a recovering alcoholic, so alcoholism I have a high degree of sensitivity to. There's a few people in my life where unfortunately I've had to put a boundary, which is really tough, especially loved ones, people near and dear to me that have had to put a boundary that I am always there for them, but I cannot be there for them if alcohol is in their life. That is a hard boundary because alcohol can be a very destructive force. It's poison actually by definition from a biologically perspective. And then of course in overuse, especially with people that have issues, can be catastrophic to the world, relationships, etc. So that's a very tough boundary that I've had to make, really painful to go through because it's not pleasant putting boundaries. But unfortunately, if you don't put boundaries as a leader, you are putting your organization not in a position to win. So that is characteristic number 3 of a nice leader, inconsistent boundaries. Characteristic number 4 of a nice leader, reactive, having a reactive approach versus responding. And man, I have been guilty of as charged on this. Bryce 1.0, the nice leader I used to be, would be overreactive instead of, being cool, calm, and collected and being control. And I really think this is grounded in self-mastery, self-improvement, personal growth. And this is why a lot of leadership requires self-mastery and personal growth. A lot of leadership training is personal development training, if you break it down. And I'll never forget this one story. It happened end of 2012, early 2013. It was when my wife, Tatiana, and I, we just launched our first Fit Body Bootcamp business in a city called Yorba Linda, California, which is in Orange County near Disneyland. And we're excited to get the business off the ground. This is the time back in the day when we didn't nearly have the support and the structure that we do now. And I remember vividly talking with Tatiana. I was like, you know what? I think there's an opportunity for us to shoot an onboarding video, an orientation video, to really provide a better onboarding experience for our prospects and our new clients, our trial clients coming in, to provide them a better experience. And that way it increases the probability we can help them with their health and fitness long term. So we decided to shoot the video. We were very light on funds, just invested my life savings in this business endeavor. We didn't have the funds for an editor, and we had this little tiny camera. And my wife shot this video. It was only a 2-minute orientation video, max I'm talking about. But 15 minutes turned into 20 to 25, and I just could not get the message out cleanly. There was always flubs, etc. And I'm looking at my watch. I'm seeing the mountain of work that I need to be done. I'm getting frustrated. And about an hour in, I finally hit the clip, and just as I'm about to close the message, I flubbed again. And I got so pissed off that literally I kicked my freaking door, put a dent in the door, almost broke my foot. And that was just a not good moment in my leadership. It clearly showed that I was a reactionary leader. I was a nice leader. I wasn't a kind leader. I wasn't an evolved leader. And I probably lost some credibility with my wife, Tatiana, in the moment. Thankfully, though, with learning and growth, I got that back. But again, nice leaders, they take a reactive approach. They react. They don't respond, which is what you want to avoid in your leadership. Characteristic number 5 of a nice leader is someone who seeks validation. And a nice leader will oftentimes gauge their success by how much praise or appreciation they receive. And they tie their self-worth or their leadership worth on other people's opinions. And this can feel good in the moment, but it is, again, a recipe for very poor leadership and poor stewardship of your organization. And the fact of the matter is leadership is tough. It's not a popularity contest. And the words of Steve Jobs, if you want to be liked, sell ice cream, don't be a leader. And that's true. You have to prioritize the long term versus the short term. And I don't have children yet. I'm working on it at some point in the near future. I hope I do. But what I do know from strong parenting, and I was a child as well, when I was a little boy, I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to stay up late. I did not want to brush my teeth. I wanted to eat candy all night long. And my mom, thankfully, being a good parent, a kind parent, not a nice parent, would enforce rules to have proper bedtime protocols, make sure I had my bath, make sure that I was well fed but not overly indulged in sugar, make sure I brushed my teeth and I had bedtime. And I used to kick and scream. But at the end of the day, my mom was not seeking validation from me. She was seeking being a good parent. And that's very much true for you and your leadership as well. So nice leaders, they seek validation in the moment. However, kind leaders, they prioritize the greater good long term. So you want to avoid seeking validation and being a nice leader, which is characteristic number 5. Characteristic number 6 of a nice leader is a leader who is overly accommodating. And a nice leader might bend over backwards just to meet everyone's request, even though it's impractical and it puts the needs of the organization behind the need of that person that you're overly accommodating. Now, there's a dichotomy into leadership. There's a dichotomy in life. There's a dichotomy in all these characteristics, because as a kind leader, you need to be accommodating, but nice leaders over accommodate. They bend over backwards. And that is also going to be really, really challenging for your leadership long term. It comes down to boundaries. So some of these characteristics, they align and they bleed through. But again, your job as a leader is to be accommodating, to meet your people where they're at. Make sure that you have strong connection. Make sure you're open. Make sure that you have the ability to connect with your people, serve your people, pour into your people, but not at the expense of being overly accommodating and really bending over backwards, which will maybe hurt them, hurt you, and hurt your organization. So there is that dichotomy. And part of leadership is just learning, going through life experience and growing in the process. And number 7, last but certainly not least, the 7th characteristic of a nice leader is overemphasizing positivity. And holy smokes, man, this really, really hits me, because I used to do this. And this is something I still struggle with to this day, very candidly, because this is all factory installed in our human wiring. We want to people please. We want to connect. We don't want to rock the boat. That's uncomfortable. That's unpleasant. All these characteristics, they bleed together. And again, going back to me, I have a high D is my personality dominant, or eagle is the metaphor that we use with Take Flight Learning. It's the framework that I teach this through. The I in me, the interactive, the parrot in me, which again is a take flight metaphor, likes to people please, likes to overemphasize the positivity. And again, you need to be positive as a leader. You can't be a Debbie Downer. You have to be optimistic. No one's going to follow a leader that's not fired up, that's excited, that's optimistic about the future. The same token, if you're too optimistic, if you don't share care, which is your love for someone, but also candor, the reality, the rawness of the situation, that also can really hurt you, because what happens is then it creates an inauthentic approach with your following, especially if it's very clear that things aren't going, well in a certain area of your business. And let's face it, everything in life is not sunshines and rainbows. You can have a very successful business, a very successful life and career, but you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs, you're going to have challenges and your problems. And if you just gloss over the problems as a leader, you will not create that connection and that trust in your following. So you have to be optimistic. You have to show the vision. You have to be excited about the vision, but you also have to share the candor and the rawness of the reality of the situation. And that's just overcoming fear. That's really comes from development of shifting away from being a nice leader into a kind leader, sharing care and candor, which is important to your leadership. So my friends, these are the 7 characteristics of a nice leader, which I've been guilty of. I'm sure you have been too. This is a growth journey that we're on together. The first step is awareness, to be able to bring clarity and awareness where you're at so that you can take action and develop. And the good news here at the CEO Show, I am committed to teaching leadership and developing you on your journey, just as I develop as a leader. I'm happy and grateful that you're on this journey with me, which is the call to action, the name of the game, and the mission of this show. So if you got value, which I'm sure you did, like, subscribe, and my biggest ask of you is drop your biggest takeaway in the comments, or maybe you're thinking of a characteristic of a nice leader that I did not mention. Would love to hear that from you, and that way you can create a healthy dialogue. And as always, adversity is your advantage, and we'll see you in the next episode.